So welcome to Coach's Corner again. We look forward to having a great show with everybody. We're just kind of giving a little bit more time for people to join. But while people are joining, I will kind of start out saying thanks for everybody for coming out to the Coach's Corner discussion page. And there's been tons of great posts this week and some good conversation over the past month. So it's been lots of fun kind of reading through that and seeing people's input on that, because it really helps broaden knowledge of fighting in general, because sometimes people get kind of keyed into one thing and they forget about many other things. So tonight's episode, we have the book written now, it's looking like about 8 years ago almost, by Sir Vitus back then, Squire Vitus. Vitus is a very fun, interesting man, you could say. And tonight, the great part is we got two of his squires, and they'll give you a little bit more in-depth conversation about him. I know I had met him early off. I was already knighted, but he really helped me expand my understanding of the Middle Ages, not only through his writing, because we're gonna do a little bit of reading as intro, and you'll get a feel for the character of the person, because his writing really kind of fit him. Lots of people remember him as a little angry knight, and which was fun and a little bit of a character sometimes. But the best part about him is he get down to the truth fast, and I think that's the important part that he actually talks about a good bit in this book is truth. And so tonight we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna read through some of the intro, and then we'll hit topics. The intro is going to show you the kind of the flavor that he presents in the book, the rest of the book. But not only that, but it actually presented how he acted and talked, which was really eye-opening in a lot of ways. And we have great guests, Viscount Kith and Sir Jamie. And both of you were Vitus' squires. Kith, just give me a feel for how you would sum that up, being Vitus' squire.
It was an interesting journey.
Well, that leaves a big question mark. So hopefully we get a lot more answers out of that question mark as we go on here. Jamie, what's the impact he had on you?
He was an intense person to be around, but I think he was the perfect knight for what I needed.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think the best part was he created and started a incredible household that still exists to this day. They do an incredible amount of work, lots of peers, and still kind of portray that same medieval attitude that he instilled, I think, in you guys. So it's super, super fun to see, and I hope to get a lot more discussion about that. So we're going to have a little bit of a reading tonight, just the first couple of paragraphs, which is Vitus's intro by Her Royal Highness Sai. And just to give you a feel for the book, if you haven't read it, this will give you a really good feel for how the rest of the book is written, and then we'll get into talking normally. So Sai, how about you go ahead and give us the little bit of reading?
Okay. So I'm going to read just the first couple of paragraphs. That is the intro to the book. And remember, it is first person perspective from Sir Vitus. Vitus von Atzinger, knight strenuous and chronicler, does lift his hands up to God and beg for mercy from his glorious son, and seeking guidance of the Holy Ghost, prays that Saint Michael will look well upon his deeds and undertakings. May the mother who gave birth to me guide me with grace and favor from the glorious heavens, and may my warlike father look down upon my struggles with a kind and approving eye. I further pray to God and his angels that the many crimes of him that sired me be burned away through my earnest and heartfelt prayers. This warlike man from Montauban came and then did go to Germany to fight in Swabia, where he did die in a fall from a castle wall. My mother was brought up in this same province. I am the son of a knight, and it was decided that I would fulfill that estate, or else go with the friars to live among the books. This was not to be, since I was drawn to the study of arms from an early age, but through luck and God's favor I did pursue the discipline of letters all the same, with some success, and have written many an account of deeds of arms within my own journals. A student of chivalry I have become, from interest and out of necessity, and the life that knights and men-at-arms choose to live is a thing that I write and speak of often. In my time I have fought in many countries, and by God's grace I have escaped death through the turn of fortune's glorious and generous wheel. I have been ransomed many times, and never at any time have I been treated harshly by any Christian knight, whatsoever land I did come to, where any belted knight or gallant squire did take me by ruse or by stout blow. But it has come to pass that here, in the middle of my life in arms, that I have taken many times the number of prisoners than I have served as captive, and that the price of my ransom has always been set higher than my worthiness. God be praised, for my lady has been most pleased by whatever meager fame I have been able to acquire. I thank him for such a wife. It is with great gladness and thankfulness that I take up the pen in order to instruct good squires and men-at-arms in the life of chivalry as I feel it should be practiced, based primarily upon the teachings of my elders, but also upon my own practices and observances. To this, I have tried to add lessons taken from various writings of our knightly ancestors, and lastly, I have added some further observances based upon the tales told in chronicle and romance. Of my opinions, there will be many who stand against them for any number of reasons. And as God has given free will to all men to think as they may, I would first address these people and forgive them any anger that they have against me or my thoughts. God grant you all the fruits of gentleness, a long life and a life of honor. Although if you stand against the law of arms, then I wish that God's vengeance shall not fall too hard upon your house. Be it as it may, and as it is, so be it.
So that's our start. And it's
Boom.
Yeah, boom. That's right. I think that the best part about this is that we get to live a little bit through this writing, kind of an ancient style of writing. And I'm sure everybody like, no, it ain't, this is the way it is. But for us in the SCA, in the modern culture that we live, this is something that I think many of us look at and go, oh, this, I've read some of these pieces, and I think Vitus is, obviously he's a great artist and writes very, very well. And I love that he opens this in a way that he took pen to paper and wanted to help others, and I think that was, one of the pieces that the good part about this beginning is, let's be real, that he was, as a squire, willing to even write this. So, I don't think people think about that enough. Everyone thinks, oh, Sir Vitus. Well, this isn't Sir Vitus. This is Squire Vitus writing all of this, which is amazing. I think, I read it way back when we first did it. It was eye-opening even as a knight then. And it's still just reading it in the last week. It's like, oh man, I'm a terrible knight and royal peer. There's always something in it that's like, oh, I could do that better. It's killing me. What do you think, Louis?
I mean, it's one of my favorite things to read. We'll often read this. Maybe every year or two we'll go back and we'll reread it. When we're driving to an event, and it's really cool because we'll pick out new things that maybe mean more to us later on, and it's just really well done.
Yeah, I agree, and that's that piece where it's like, there's more meaning to it each time you grow it yourself, right? So, Kith, did you have to listen to this stuff all day long when you were? Jamie, Kith, either of you? This is like, he called you up.
So I was going to say, reading it through this time, it'd been, I don't know, 10 years since I'd read it last. And it was all fresh because this was the stuff he talked about all the time. This was how he lived his SCA life. day to day, and that's what he wanted to see more and
Yeah.
more of. I think that's why he wrote it, was he really wanted this to be more about what the SCA was, and that was what he was really into, bringing that medieval feel to our sport.
Yeah. It was it was very instrumental, like for me to think of what we do in our subculture. um it gives a little medieval historical flair, um kind of viewed in the modern a modern lens.
Hmm.
And the stuff that he wrote about, it actually helped me become a better student of chivalry from what I had in my head, like before, to like what how the SCA looks at it.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I absolutely agree. In fact, after reading this book, one of the first things I did was, ask my good lady to help me upgrade my kit and look more the part. And it was amazing because even I read the book, and the next event I went to, I went and I apologized to their majesties for not looking the part of a knight, and promised and gave my word that I would work harder at living to that goal. And I think that's the part. Sometimes people have to, this whole book is about calling people out, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of truth in this book that people are like, no, that ain't the way it is, and it doesn't have to be. This is something for you to think about, and I think that's the best part. And if you're like, if you really dig in and think about it, this didn't only change the way my appearance was, which I should. There was other things I should fix now, but it also changed the way I actually took squires. And because years later, after taking squires and having some issues, and I mean, great squires, but it was more of a friendship. And I think I had read through the book again, and so I had a kind of a fresh place to start taking squires again. And I was like, well, you know what? You don't need to be my friend. You need to be my squire. You need to serve me, and I will train you. I will teach you. I will help you. But you're my squire. Your job is to serve, and as I serve the crown. And that's I took that goal. And to tell you the truth, I've had a much, and I've seen some of my squires. People look, and not even squires, men at arms. People look and they see what they're doing. They're like, that's what I want to do. Right. And it's truly amazing how many other people are, like, every time you set something down, they were grabbing your shield or your helmet, they're handing you water, they were doing all of those things, and other people started seeing it, and next thing you know, everybody was being polite, and everybody was trying to be helpful and serve and live that space. And it I know in our area it made a huge difference and change of how it went forward. Not that all the other knights in our area did that, but even knight or squires from other knights, they were like, they'd go to them and say, hey, can I do this for you?
So I had a knight come up to me a couple of years ago and ask about that. He was like, I would go to events and he would just put his arms out, and a cloud of squires would come up, and then he would be disarmed. And he was like, why, that's not anything that I'm familiar with. And it seemed really odd and kind of debasing to me, and I didn't really get it. And he asked me, like, and what's that about? And as the squire, it's a little bit ironic, but it actually upped the magic.
Yes.
Because to serve someone, I think I'm frozen.
No, you're good. Keep going.
We can see you.
All right. Okay. I'm back. To serve someone really put it into perspective that this, you don't act as a squire if you're playing volleyball. We are really doing something different, and it really gave a medieval feel to it. And he was always respectful about it. It was never a demand. It was never a, you will do this for me because you have given yourself to me wholly. It was definitely a relationship thing. And I get it, maybe not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
but it's powerful.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, and it's like I said, it's interesting because you bring up the point of relationship, and you know, there is a relationship there. It doesn't have to be a friendship, but there is a relationship there. And you know, a relationship is and I talk to knights about this all the time. Relationship is a two-way game. If you're going to help them and teach them and mentor them, what are you allowing them to give back? If you don't allow them to carry your armor bag, pack your armor, bring you things, grab your shield or helmet from the field, then it's really a one-way relationship. And it's just something to think about. And I think a lot of people, there's a couple of things is we're all like super independent, but we kind of have to take that outside. If you're making a relationship, squire relationship, that has to be defined. Every time I talk to somebody who wants to be a squire, I'm like, so what are you going to do for them? That's what you should ask that's what you should ask them before. Right?
So I'm going to read a little quote from the book. I say to you that a squire should, until the day that he is made a knight, have the best interests of his knight foremost in his mind, because to serve a knight is to serve a king.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's ding ding, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's the idea is, and we get into the much more in the book later. The idea is that prowess ain't it all, right? I mean, to be a knight, anybody can have prowess. Well, not anybody, but lots of people can have prowess. But to serve somebody, that's a little different.
Right? That true service, and all the other parts that squires should do or should know about, that anybody who strives to be a knight. Like, I learned how to do dance during your reign.
Yeah.
Your last reign, you know, following you guys around, picking up, making sure things were going right. And it's like, okay, I need to find out more about, you know, the society, the greater society, and that those things, like going after your knight or even your brother knight or other men at arms, and, you know, getting their shields to not be face down, covering their helms in the sunshine, just that I don't know,
Right,
maybe a esprit de corps kind of feeling of we're all going in that same direction.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think Cy brings up a point. Any knight who feels shame at being served by his squire should perhaps never have been made a knight.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a strong statement, right? And perhaps they should have become a priest instead, or some other thing. I love that, right? And it's like, you know, if you have to teach somebody how to serve, because that's what you do. You know, I think that's a huge comment, and I don't think a lot of knights actually do that well. It's hard to give up control, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and he would also say 100% that being a knight is service to the king. I mean, he was very big into fealty and was a royalist through and through. I mean, you'd go to his shop, which, you know, for a while was just a shed in his backyard, and you'd have the names of the monarchs. Every time it changed, cross it out, put the next one up there. So it was daily on his mind, and lived it. You know, so he would say that service as a squire is training, right? If you can serve as a squire, you're going to serve as a knight.
Because what is a knight without a king who make him knight?
Yeah. I think you're nailing it. You know, this is the kind of flow through the whole book. I think it's really that idea of that service and stuff. It's that serve the crown, and you're gonna see that really when we talk about mercenaries and things. It's going to be a little bit of fun. We had it's cultural. I don't think we have that as much now in the mid-realm as we did in the past, but it was a pretty big thing, and there was a lot of words said about it. So
yeah, not like it used to be.
No, I know. So here's one that I thought I think Cyback posted it up in the private chat, but a man who first gives you your arms and teaches you the practice of knightly weapons will rightfully expect some show of loyalty from you. And it is a shameful thing to take arms from a man and then turn away from his guidance and counseling, and to not give him friendship and support if he desires to bring a troop into battle under his direction, especially if you're born to undertake such a noble task. And he did this with Omrad, and Omrad helped him, and really, he served Omrad until until he was knighted, and then he started his own household. And I think that's a powerful statement, because and let's take a look at that was in very medievalese, but let's talk about the real piece here, and that is, so and we got all knights here. If you put somebody in gear, put them in harness, have been training them, what are your expectations? So I think that's what he's saying here. I think all of us, if that person just goes and all of a sudden he's like, hanging out with someone else and doing all that stuff, it's a bit, I think it's disappointing for sure, but it's also a bit of a black mark, and in some ways it's a character thing. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I've been, hanging out with these guys, and they're going to help me on this stuff. I thank you tons for this. They're a little closer or whatever. That's something. But to just go do it without conversation, I think is rude.
Yeah.
So.
And I know a lot of people have like the weird social anxiety stuff where they're it's not really confrontation. It's just, speaking plainly. A lot of people have that problem of just putting out, hey, like you said, I'm going to hang out with these guys. They're closer to me or whatever, thanks for setting me up and giving me some kind of direction to look at. Right. And instead there's a lot of folks that are just going to clam up, and I want to get into an argument or something like this. It's not going to be an argument. It's just going to be like, okay, cool. Just, let me know,
Yeah. And I think if somebody did that, you'd be like, no problem. Let's be real, that maybe they're closer in age or whatever. The key is you have to be careful, and people pick their things. If later on you find out, well, these people weren't who I thought they were, and you try to come back, it makes it difficult. So this is one of those places. It's not that person's going to carry a black mark for you, but I will tell you that, I probably think twice at somebody who I've put in kit and worked and trained hard, and they've gotten stuff from me, but I've never really gotten stuff, any type of, they don't need to give me stuff. What they have to do is show respect.
Right. Some kind of reciprocity, be it.
Yep. So, everybody moves on in a way. And in many cases, we move on many people move on when they get knighted and so on. But there's that conversation. I would say this is a warning for those really. This is a list in this whole book. It's a list of warnings.
Yeah.
Take them as they are, but this is how you feel. Louis, if you were training somebody, and we give training away to people all the time. That's what we do. But if you were training somebody and spent a lot of effort and time, and really you didn't get a lot of thanks, or they just moved on to the next person, would you spend as much time training when they come back, or would you be as invested as you were when you first started?
Right. I mean, I think we do get invested in people when we train them. Our local culture is train everybody as much as they are willing to take. And some people are here for this, the sport of it, and they're real competitive, and some people are here just for the fun aspect. So it can differ greatly, but and there's sometimes, is it the knight that needs to talk to the possible dependent, or is it okay for that person to reach out to the knight and say, hey, I'm interested? It depends on the person, or maybe the pairing of the people, which way that goes. And some knights they only want to be asked because they want to see that somebody's got a level of commitment that they're willing to ask. And sometimes you might lose an opportunity if you don't reach out to that person as a knight as well.
And this may also be a little bit of a cultural thing too. I'm thinking, southern part of the kingdom, still there aren't that many knights, and there are even less royal peers. So he was being trained by Omerod at the time, who had only been fighting 2 years. So the amount of work that we have to put into unbelts here can be a lot more one-on-one, because there just aren't that many trainers. There aren't that many good coaches. And so I wonder if that's some of the mismatch too, is, if you've got a dozen people that you could go to, maybe spending an afternoon with this one doesn't build that relationship. Whereas here you're spending 6 months, 2 years, 5 years.
Yeah, no, I would agree 100%. And I think where you're coming from there is that, you're spending a great deal of time, and that means that person's spending a great deal of effort on you, and they're giving freely of their training and time. So, there's that expectation of at least friendship to come out of it. And honesty. And this book talks about that a lot. Up where we had a lot more royal peers and stuff. We, in our culture at this practice, we give it away freely. Like, it's water, here you go, and the interesting thing though, is I have never felt like somebody just came here or used me and left. There's the gratitude and the thanks. It's that simple. It's like, that they, that's the key. So it's not saying don't go train under other people. It's saying, ask your knight that, who else would you suggest that I go learn some stuff from? Or, when you go somewhere, learn and come back and talk to your knight about that. So he understands and can help you if you're trying to learn something that person was doing. But it's all about that communication.
So how do you think, with that communication, how do you feel humility plays a part?
Yeah, it's interesting because, somebody brought this up, and there's actually tons of parts in this book about humility, and I'm going to drive to some of this a little bit faster. And some of them I'm actually uncomfortable with sometimes, and I shouldn't be. But I look forward to actually finding that. If I pass it up, or you guys see it, you can, even if it's somewhere else in a book, grab it and we can talk about that. There's a number of pieces, and when we get to them, I'll even talk why I'm uncomfortable with them. But because I think his version of humility, I think a lot of people take humility as I can't talk about myself. Mm-hmm. And that's not actually humility. I think, sometimes humility is a deed on the field. Humility isn't, I've been called on this, isn't, killing somebody and walking over their dead body because you're great, right?
Yeah.
And what I learned from Vitus was humility, the way we think about it, is not a medieval virtue. Yeah, the way we think about, like you said, don't talk about yourself, don't brag. That was part of the chivalric culture, was to brag,
yes,
to talk about yourself, to make stories that were worth telling. And the humility part is that it's not all about you, that it's about, the fealty and through God's grace and all these little things that make it not ego, but still a good story.
Right.
Yeah. Because stories are, in fact, there is nothing he talks about in the book. He talks about telling stories about others is foremost the thing you should do, especially, after traveling to foreign wars, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's a great way to put that is, you can tell these stories and then, I did these things for my liege,
Mm-hmm.
Good. Because then it's about, you were able to do those things because of him.
Yeah.
Or her.
Yeah.
Right.
Or my lady, or
or your lady who, so it's not really about you. It's about what you did or how you felt, but you did those things for somebody else. So hopefully that helps a little bit on the idea of humility. That I think that's a big part of the what he talks about in the book. So, and that's actually hard to get past the difference. So, let's see, what's another good one as we roll down here. Be wary of making claims of undying defiance against the crown who rules your land, because the memory of the crown is long, since when the great kings die, his sons will remember you railing, the railing you did against his father. I think that talks about is talk crap and it stays with you. Other people know. You just don't know when it's going to get out, right?
Yeah.
And especially if it's against somebody of higher station, even if you don't like them.
Vitus was real big on that. In fact, I'd say for him, that was where humility really, really was rubber meets the road. Was, he really thought about it as betters. The people are at a higher station. Now, this is all persona talk, right? I mean, he didn't really think that these were better people or that they were, somehow created differently. But if you're playing the game, that's part of the game, right? And so humility would be, even if you think poorly,
right, showing deference and respect always.
Always. Yeah. That's correct. And one of some of those things that came out in that is, and it's talked about in the book as well, and that is showing difference in respect. And respect means using titles and Vitus wailed against unbelts just treating knights and royal peers and anyone of higher station like they're your buddy. That drove him crazy, right? Because and it's going to happen. You're going to have those cases where, and I think that's where he gets into, the game and how it, Jamie, you talked about this earlier. That game, that medieval presence you bring into our culture. If you talk that way to these people in front of others, then you brought them into the Middle Ages. And they know that's what they came here for, right? I mean, if you're just like, hey, bud, let's have a beer. It's like, well, I could do that in the bar.
I think everybody has a expectation of, what they want with respect to enjoying the game. And maybe, through the book, it feels like Vitus's expectation is very high that we should make, if it's the game that we're here for, that we should make this really good for everybody. And we can do that by really respecting the game and respecting people and, not falling back to 21st century.
Yeah. I can't agree more. Our producers helping out a little bit here. Here's a great quote. Any squire who deserves knighthood for himself should prove his undertaking of the gravity of the office of knighthood by knowing and understanding and declaring that knights are different than other soldiers. So
a little controversial now.
So yeah, I mean, because I think in nowadays we're trying to set all that difference aside, right? In the modern culture, it's like you're not allowed to be different, or you're allowed to be as different as you want. It's there's lots of culture going on there. I think the key here is that you understand your place, and that goes across the ideas of titles, that goes across the idea how you interact with somebody. That doesn't mean that you can't be in private or with your real close friends just chatting with your buddy who's Sir whatever or whatever. It's like I don't want to constantly be sit there and treated. If I got treated like a royal peer by everybody in the SCA all the time, and I'd be done because it wouldn't be fun for me either, right? We do want those friendships and that fun, but when you're around others, that's when you have to watch it the most.
Well, I think Vitus would also say it doesn't mean you can't disagree or have an opinion. I mean, if he was exceedingly opinionated,
that's for sure,
would tell anybody. But if you had rank, if you were an equal, he would use all the honorifics and he would make sure that it was respectful, and would also be respectful if you were an unbelt or not a peer. But you can do both, right? You don't have to lose yourself or be lesser if you're playing the game.
Yes. And that's he actually talks about that in the book, about how to present your opinion politely. And I think, and really that should go for everybody personally, but it definitely goes when, there's a great quote, and I'm going to let somebody else find it, but it essentially covers that a squire is not a knight, and understand your position. So you have to take that and remember that, because the next level of that is be careful how you state your positions, because that could reflect on what people think who you are.
So I'm going to read that. I think this is the one you're talking about. A squire is a squire and a knight is a knight, and a man-at-arms or a squire who is offered the accolade of knighthood remains exactly what he is until he is belted with the traditional military belt and struck by the hand of his king. He is not recognized, he is made.
And that is it. You can think anything you want. Before I was knighted, I'm like, I should be, why does that guy get knighted? Or, I can beat all these guys. I should be a knight. I am not a knight. I was not a knight. And no matter what I did, I wasn't going to be a knight until the king made me a knight.
Right. And a lot of people, you don't understand until you understand. It's like you reference to understand as like, oh no, I was wrong. And that usually doesn't happen until after you get knighted. And it's like, oh yeah, I was dumb.
So Cy posted another, and this comes back down to a little bit about how you watching what you say, or even better, Jamie, how you say it, right? And that quote out of the book is, all good squires and men-at-arms should endeavor to do all that they can to advance the cause of the high speech. This does not mean that one must talk like a bad actor, learning phrases that are noble and that do honors to deeds of arms of chivalry. So, and that covers a lot of the things you just talked about. It covers talking about your deeds and other people's deeds, right? That builds our culture. That's how our culture was built.
Yeah.
Name fame is still, the first and foremost in I've known dukes that type of name fame they have isn't the type of you really want, right? So, be careful about the name fame you get. But if you see others doing deeds then you should be spreading it, because hopefully they see you doing deeds and that you're spreading it, and they're spreading it for you.
So fun, quick story about that. So one of the first times that I talked to Corvus, who was Crow, he wasn't knighted then, in person, I watched him just completely destroy people in a great sword tourney, like he does.
Yeah.
After the fact, I went up and I gave him a token, and it was a little Atzinger wheel. And he's like, "Man, this is great. This is only the second token I've ever received. The other one was tonight from Sir Christian von Atzinger. Is this something that you all do?"
That's awesome. Yes. And I think, and I have to say, in a way, I think we've gotten away from that culture, as maybe some of as Vitus has not been around. We did it a good bit back in the day, and I think in some ways we have definitely gotten away from that culture a little. This is where the book comes in and reminds us of the things that we should be doing, and I think that's the cool part. Here's one. A king comes and goes according to the will of the heaven, but the dishonor and shame you may bring upon yourself through your railing may live forever. So this not only for squires, although this book is primarily geared to squires, men at arms, but I would say this goes across to everybody, and that again, there are better ways to communicate. Just like you said, Jamie, there are better ways to communicate, even if the truth, other than just spreading rumor and those things. So, and I think people look at that, and that's one of those places where if people find out that that's what you're doing, it definitely does the forever thing. So let's see. So Kith, what do you have there? I'm reading out of since I was in there.
The question that Greg Rice had.
Okay.
Do you all agree that a knight is not recognized, that they are made? And it's like, for me, yes.
Yeah. And actually there's a whole, and Louis, you do a great job knowing exactly where stuff is. He actually talks about this, doesn't he, Louis? In the book, he talks about essentially he disagrees that knights are
recognized.
Yes.
I think I actually might be. I can tell Louis digging because he knows where it is too.
And back to this theme, right? Like if it's about station and it's about titles, you can be knightly. Anybody can be knightly. And he talks a lot about that. You can have knightly virtues. You can have prowess. You can do all the things that a knight would do, but you're not a knight until you're a knight. Right. And to Kith's point, there are rights and privileges that come with being a knight that you don't get even as a high-end unbelt. So it is a different experience once you put that belt on, no matter who you are.
Yeah, that's when the job starts.
If a man is knighted by a king, that king finds him worthy, and it is his right to knight those whom he pleases to elevate.
Yes. And then in the days of Roland, it was not common for a knight to make another knight who has not first proven himself as a good vassal. And know these things are only for the hands of kings to do. Remember this: if you would defy the rule of dukes and counts and earls and great lords of the land, beware, for they are maintained by the king and arms. Maintained by the king, and the arms of the king are long. And so it's that idea. I think it went from knights make knights, and that's still part of the game, to kings make knights. But I think the key is recognized is the word that I think we come in. And again, there's more in here, but recognize means that you already think you're a knight, or you already been knightly, and then Jamie nailed it. It's like, I know a lot of people that are knightly. I know people that are knightly that don't even fight, right? But until the king dubs you, you're not a knight. Nothing wrong with being knightly.
There's another short piece to that, kind of talking about what, speaking to what you were just saying. Many who have natural ability will not do the work necessary to become long or in wind or strong in arm, and so never achieve the level of prowess that they could eventually reach. Those who will not do the work and yet complain bitterly about their lack of achievement or recognition in the vocation of arms have no right to do so.
Yeah, and that goes to there's two ends onto that. Is one is, I think, goes down to ego, and that Jamie talked about that a little earlier. Those who think they are, and and to tell you the truth, be careful to judge those people too harshly, because the path is long and hard, and at some point you want to give up, and you make excuses, and sometimes you get caught in those. And I think it's, I don't know, and you guys comment on this, but I've seen lots of unbelts and squires shortly before they're knighted question why they aren't knighted. And I don't actually, in some ways, I kind of like it, because, they have to watch how openly they question that, because then you're calling the king out for not doing it.
Yeah.
Right. So be careful. But, especially when you compare yourself to somebody else, because that's next to impossible. You don't know what that other person has done, or any of those pieces. But if you wail against it, it's like, and hammer on the table and not let the subject die, then you've gone too far. But to say, I believe myself knightly, I believe my prowess is that of a knight, I have no problem with that. Why am I not getting knighted? I don't even have a problem with that, because you know what? Maybe somebody will tell you why you're not.
Yeah, the next line on after that last quote is, many who think they are working hard certainly are not. The way to know these things is to simply measure your prowess against the best of the knights in your province. This can involve many hard lessons where great frustration and even heartbreak is to be found. But those who are firmly resolved will endure what is necessary to advance their skills and reputations. Yeah.
Sorry, Louis. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, so there's two other things that I think of when, as we were talking about this. One is watching your peers get knighted that are maybe around your level before you get knighted. And some of that can be difficult for people. And the other side of that is, I've heard many times where just before somebody gets knighted, they're like, I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. Maybe I should just give up on all of this.
So kind of like Branos, I actually like seeing people at that point too, because peerage is a lifelong thing. As long as you're in the game, unless you do something completely egregious, you're going to be a peer. And so I want to see, how do you do when it feels like you're not getting anywhere? How do you do when you feel like you put in all this work and nothing good is happening to you? Because there's going to be long stretches once you're a peer. I mean, that, you're not going to get a captaincy. You're not going to get the accolades that you get along the way to the peerage. You just got to do it because you love it.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, I like it. That just means they have passion for what they're doing. I want our knights to have passion for what they do. So All right. So we're gonna jump down to, we talked a lot about how a squire acts, talks, treats others, about their deeds. Maybe even we just talked about really taking a hard look at what you're really doing, because what you're doing in your mind may not be as hard as what others are even expecting. So it's one of those pieces where sometimes you have to look inside, and sometimes you even have to ask others. And I think that goes a long way. Let's see here. I see Kith, what, you want to read that one?
Oh, I think it just the travails and dark times where glory and cheer seem to be so far away are to be cherished. For how else can one be forged and thus learn to respect the labors of those who have gone before us? I mean, the first time I read that, I had to put the book down and smell the burning rubber of my brain as my mind exploded. And I was like, oh, I've been shitty. Yeah, okay. Good. Yes. Let me try to be better.
Yeah. And it's fun. Her Highness, I loved her little, I'm not going to call her out here. She's like, she read that passage and was like, oh, then I'm doing it right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I love that, right? I mean, that's kind of it's kind of the path we all went through. It's nice to know that, that it's like we feel like we're hacking our way through the woods, and that I have no clue what path we're on, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's the same path everybody's on. This is great.
I mean, the Atzingers, we have a term for that. It's the misery tour.
Right? It's a period of heightened community and shared experience. Right? And it's not always pleasant, but it's mostly tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
So one of the things I really like, you're kind of hitting on it, Branos. Vitus was all about the narrative. He talked about a lot of people's problems were that they were the hero in their story, and therefore they could do no wrong. And he's like, everybody's the hero in their story. That's not the problem, right? The problem is when that gets divorced from reality. And he talked a lot about, what you're talking about, like I'm in the jungle, I'm lost. Well, that's the story you're telling yourself. If you're the struggling hero who's at the, breaking point, and they're going to overcome that and become better, that's a whole different story, right? That's noble.
Yes.
Whereas the first one is just frustrating.
That's correct. And a lot of times they figure out if they're going to turn back or forge ahead. And that's where you find true character. So let's talk and move on to essentially all those who, and I apologize to our let me throw that here. But they're going to talk about equipment, because he talks a good bit about equipment. Because it makes a difference, and it sure made a difference to him. And he dressed the part all the time. And all of you dressed the part. I see it all the time. You're an example of, that period and what people believe a knight looks like, and a soldier looks like, and a man-at-arms and a squire look like. But all who fight in harness, who learn that the use of the knight's arms are rightly called men-at-arms, regardless of their rank. In other words, the idea of, if you don harness and you want, you use knightly arms, and he talks actually what knightly arms are and so on. And we'll talk about the differences. I think there's essentially, and Louis, maybe you have that, the differences that he kind of calls, there's, knights, squires, men-at-arms, and then there's, the soldiery class. But, I think the key there is that everybody knows that they can be knightly. It doesn't mean that they have everything it takes, maybe not, especially that minute, to be a knight later, recognized as or not recognized, but made a knight later. It just means that we can all be knightly and we can all look knightly, right? We can all don the weapons of what a knight would have been in period. Now, that's a broad case of talk, especially, that can be all controversial. And you know what? Vitus didn't mind that, tough. You use that weapon. Well, that's great. You're a peasant. And, or in his case, I think, you're essentially a soldier, and it doesn't mean, you may be paid to do a job, right? It's just your job. And, but he talks about this a good deal here. And that was one of the big piece, that men-at-arms are different than that of common soldiery. And that what he means by in battles itself, you present the way you believe a knight should be. And that doesn't mean there are times when you are told to use something. Later on, they talk about, you do not use a pavis. Well, if you're told to use a pavis, then it's perfectly fine, right? Because your liege lord told you to use a pavis. But I remember when combat archery first came in. Woo! Where's that? Well, that was fun, right, Ken?
Yeah, that was great.
Vitus actually loved them. I think that's why Vitus actually made so many daggers and scabbards, so that everybody would have a nice dagger to cut off people's fingers. But
or stab them in the eye.
So that's an interesting thing about Vitus, because I was going to bring this up too, is that he's kind of famous for disliking combat archery, among other things. But he would talk about it in different terms than I think other might expect, right? So would he get irritated if he got shot while he was doing a spear god thing? Yes, absolutely he would. Did he hate combat archers? Not really. He talks about the most fun he ever had at an SCA event was he got a crossbow and he got behind the biggest dude on the line, and he's like, "Hey, when I tap you, open up like a door." And he was like, it was a blast all day long. The deal with him, though, was we're doing two different things.
That's right.
You're doing your soldiery thing. You're doing your combat archery thing. I'm doing my knightly thing. You hit me with the arrow. It was a very skillful shot. You have your own kind of prowess. It just doesn't apply to me. We're doing different things.
Yes.
And I don't. And his other thing was I don't care about what you're doing, right? Like I'm here to be knightly, so I need to be fighting the other people who are doing the knightly thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna do heroic stuff.
Or you're going to capture the other people and play that end of the game. Where as a soldier, you're not there to do that, right? Mm-hmm. You're there to perform and essentially, kill others and win a battle. That's your job as the knightly class and the men-at-arms class, that noble class. And this is very period. They were there capturing each other, pounding each other to the ground. In the 12th century, it looked super poorly upon if you killed people, other nobles. It's okay, soldiers, no big deal. But nobles, oh my goodness, it was, they would make fun of you if you did sometimes, because it was like, well, that earned you a lot, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, or the time that William Marshall, for his first tournament, and it's like he was being a badass and doing all the stuff, and then later on, they're like, "Hey, William, give us like something, a cup or whatever you got during the day," and he's like, "I didn't get anything." And he's like, "What? What do you mean you didn't get anything? You were smoking people all day long. I don't understand how this is." And that gave him that shifted his mindset. And it's kind of like the same thing here. And it's like you're not thinking in the terms of a proper man-at-arms,
right?
If you're going to be doing this, because it's a different thing.
Yeah. If you want to get a real chuckle, go back and read. They have petitions to the Pope from all kinds of knights all across the ages about how they should excommunicate anybody who fires a crossbow in a battle. And you could cut and paste it to any number of Facebook threads from yesterday.
Yeah. Did Vitus write this? No, this was
This is not a new discussion.
Yeah. Like war crimes. Those Genoese, the Genoan crossbow guys who were badass, but it's like, you only fight Saracens with those guys. Who cares if they die?
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, oof. The more things change, the more they stay the same.
So there's a quote in the book, Side found it, and it's the knight and the archer are not the same class. They share nothing except the fact that both breathe through their noses. I love that one.
It was in our squires oath. You will not loose bolt nor arrow at a belted knight.
Yeah.
He's like, you can shoot peasants all day long, but if you miss and hit one, you're going to be in trouble. So just don't even try.
Yeah. And I don't think any of us did. Mm-mm. Because we were like, no, I don't want any of that smoke. No, he already yells at me enough for my normal stuff. I don't need any. Oh, what happened? Oh, I shot Duke Edmund in the face.
Oh.
On accident. Mm.
Yeah.
Never wanted to have that conversation.
No.
Didn't need it.
No.
Now, the people that were not squires in his household, he encouraged heavily to pick up crossbows. Because what's the best way to stop combat archery is with more combat archery that's on your side.
Right. Well, and he actually talks about that's part of your job is to bring people to the field, soldiers to the field, and that was anything from archers or any common soldier that's not using knightly weapons, sappers, siege engines. You want all those things, and it's your responsibility because you're serving the crown to win something. But it doesn't mean as a noble or as a man-at-arms or as a squire or knight that those are your jobs. Those aren't your job. Your job is to bring them, pay them, get them there, use them to essentially get what your liege lord wants, right? So, all right. So next one. So I think through that one, I think my point on that conversation, that short conversation on more on the differences in that wasn't even so much about kit, a little bit about the arms you use, but that was more on the end of as a squire, as a men-at-arms, the idea was to go out there and see if you're seeking knighthood, it's usually through tournament and grand melee. It's not necessarily impossible in melee. Now understand grand melee and melee are two different things. Grand melee was fought 12th century to essentially capture people. Soldiers did not fight, and soldiers, we talk archers and others, did not fight in those tournaments because it wasn't about killing people. In fact, the swords were rebaited, the tips were rounded. It was looked very poorly upon to kill a knight. Now that didn't mean that you wouldn't have some of your men-at-arms, 10 men-at-arms jump a knight that you rode into a barn, so there's things, but the idea was to capture. It wasn't about killing other knights in those tournaments. In war, totally different. Now, so there's nothing wrong. I don't personally find, my job is to bring soldiers to win the king's battles. And in whatever way we have to do that. And that means we have to have lots more knights with spears on the line. That's what we have. If that means I have to bring twice as many archers as their archers, that's what I hire, right? Or I sponsor. That's just being a good leader. So the next one does talk about harness though.
So I've got a small quote here. Let me speak a bit more of livery for a few moments, and of who may with no chance of shame or presumption wear their own livery into battle. First, I would say that the fighting done in tourney and joust is of a different kind than found in the grand melee or in the war or siege games, but that it is right and a good thing for a man to wear the crest emblazoned of his own family into joust or tourney.
So what do you think that covered? I mean, how do you think he was thinking about when he's presenting that as in his comments here? How do you think that what was he trying to tell people?
I mean, you should you should dress the part, and you should wear your arms so people can recognize you.
Yeah. Or in this, I think in this case too, they talk about in there are times where like in larger battles you wear the arms of your kingdom, and I think Vitus was a big sponsor on wearing kingdom arms.
Yeah.
And almost in the opposite sense too, right? That like if you're in war, if you're in the grand melee and you're following a commander, it's not about you anymore. You don't put your personal arms because you want to blend in with everybody else in your unit. You want to be part of your unit. It's not about you anymore.
And I think that's a good call out. I think, and that's one of those pieces is like, you committed as part of a team, and I think we see that in modern sense of teams, right? And I think here is a reminder of that. But the reminder, to get back to what His Highness talks about is you don't wear those things, and he absolutely was against, like, you don't wear your kingdom arms while you're in a tournament. Right? You wear yours
presumptuous.
Right. And it's name, the idea at that point, it's kind of funny. It's a two-way street. If you wear your kingdom arms while you're in a tournament, it's like you're trying to show off, that you're better than everyone else in your kingdom. And you kind of get that little feel because the arms are what you're wearing is resembles is who you are. So if you're wearing the kingdom stuff, it's like, look at me, I'm great. Best in the kingdom because I wear the arms. It's compared to you wear your own arms and then you gain renown. So I think and I've seen a little bit of that. So I don't personally take it that way. I don't think everyone takes it that way. But I think it's a good. I think he nails it in both the wear your personal in tournament, wear your teams on the field, wear the kingdom if you don't have a team. Right. And all of that can be done. And it shows, you wear your kingdom arms when maybe you don't belong to a lance or a household or a knight that allows you to wear their arms or their household arms. The kingdom arms are there for a reason. And it shows that you want to be part of the team and serve. Well, guess what? To be a knight, what do we want to do? What's one thing we look for?
Service.
That you serve the crown. Right? And I think that's, that was a great quote, Louis. I think that's the part. It's one of these big pieces that feed that service piece, how we serve. And I think also in this space, he talks, and Louis, you said it is, and this is where I talked earlier. It's like, look your part. If you're wearing a little bit of everything, that's great to get on the field so you can fight. If you want to be more, look whatever part that you want to be. And because others, and not even knights, other people are looking at that for that historical piece that they're trying to live in this society. So the closer you are, there are going to be people look at a great Viking kit and have no clue what it is. And they're like, well, all right. And then they look at a 14th century kit and they're like, that's what I want to be. And then you're going to have somebody look at a 14th century kit and go, well, look at that pretty boy. And then they look at a Viking kit and they're like, that's the guy I want to be. Right. So the good part is we have variety, but look good. Don't go out there ragtag. Don't go out there. So Vitus ever let you guys fight without a symbol on your shield?
Big trouble. Big trouble.
And that symbol, it doesn't paint your shield. If it's tore up, fix it. If it's, if your swords look terrible, restrap them, recover them. It's put the effort. That effort is seen by others.
So real quick story that's in a kind of the same vein here, and then I'll address one of the questions that just came up. So when I started in the SCA, I was actually ancient Greek persona.
Oh, wow.
Like terrible, like almost vinyl over barrel plastic chest piece, like clothes face down. It was a sight to see. When I squired to Vitus, he said, "You can keep doing that. I'm not going to stop you. There's lots of ways to play this game. But I make all of my squires one set of armor. And I do this professionally, but I only make 14th century
armor." Well, that's an easy choice.
Right?
You didn't stop.
So we got a question that says, when you were squires, were you encouraged to wear your arms or the arms of your knight? Where your deeds seem to reflect on or increase his renown or your personal renown? So he was real big on household is different than the knight. So if you'll take a gander behind Viscount Kith there, that is the badge of House Atzinger. That was everywhere. We were more than encouraged to put
Wheels
that
of plenty
on anything that was visible as many times as we could. That is not Sir Vitus's arms. And were we seen wearing Sir Vitus's arms, we would no longer be squires.
Right.
It would only take once.
Yeah.
And part of that was because our good deeds weren't reflecting necessarily on Vitus, although, if we did good, it made him look like a better knight for having good squires. It was very much about bringing the household into good renown and raising the name of the Atzingers and making it internationally known for excellence.
So this is good. This is interesting. I mean, unfortunately, we're burning through time like crazy. It cracks me up how fast. We could probably do 2 episodes on this at least, but I'm going to burn through a couple, and there's at least one that we're going to bring up, a little controversial, but I think it's worth bringing up. I think, the key here is that to be knightly, you must be the part, not falsely, but out of prideful, or prideful, but out of earnest to the living that role, right? So, don't just do it saying, here's how great I look. It's you do it because you want to live the actual role. And I think that's the key is just work to live the role that you're trying to be. So Kith, you and Saib have been talking about One Piece, and I think that's one that I definitely want to bring up. And there are many ladies of small frame within the list and on the fields of battle, although they can smite with great skill and they can be dangerous as any, it's still an ugly thing to beat them down and run them over with no regard of their safety. So for me, that goes for anyone smaller than you or less skilled, in fact, right?
Yeah. And if you think about the time when this was percolating in his brain, it was like last century, right? Is the I guess the mindset shift of not wanting to try and move away from the more sexist, I guess, vocabulary that we pretty much had in
the 90s.
Yeah, in the late 80s, early 90s, when there weren't that many female fighters on the list. It was more of a rarity than we see nowadays, or even 10 years ago, right? And there were some old timers that were, giant dicks, and they would specifically target people to punish, to try and get them to not play, or to play in a different area, or more peaceful area. And I think that's part of him trying to be that basic truthful of, hey, don't be a jerk. And if you wanna mix your modern day chivalry with our game chivalry notions, you can't just paste people, especially if they're girls, and then trying to move that thought process and that verbiage into a more, like how he said that, this is I can see that societal mores are shifting, and I'm trying to phrase this to get these guys to start thinking about that.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And then there's a lot. We're going to find the other whole paragraph about this, because it's unfortunate that it has to be brought up, but it was something in the past, and it's still unfortunately something now. But before I hit then, there's a couple of quotes, and if you guys find quotes real quick and you just wanted to say them. But here's two I always love hearing. A blunt turning sword is still a sword, not a stick, not a bat. A bat is something that children hit against a ball. So the idea is, no hats and bats, right? It's helmets and swords. We use that a lot, and I think it did drive him crazy, and I think it's actually important to remember this. Your helmet may be called a bassinet or a helm or something else. I apologize, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but or some other name that is what you should call it. A hat is something that generals wear to dance or to feast. It's like, I love Vitus in these little things that he talks about. I am looking for the one, because there's a whole sentence about, here's it may come to pass that a king may make a knight against the will of the order of the chivalry, but this is very rare thing, and in such a man is totally undeserving of the elevation. In other words, he's not totally undeserving. He's just making it against the order of the king. The body of the order will decide for themselves whether this is a proper thing, but it is almost unheard of a man who has been made a knight to have had no support or substance within the order. And I would agree with that. I mean, I think there are certain candidates that half the order believe one thing, half the order believe another. It's a hard decision, but this decision has to be made, because I would tell you, and this is based on culture, if some people of strong will won't bend to half people, they're never going to make those half right, and they'll make the other half very happy. So it's a hard decision. So be careful about saying that it was against the order. It's not against the whole order. It's the second piece is, it really doesn't matter in the end. He has made a knight, and that's what he is. He's no longer a squire or a man at arms. He is a knight. Now that's hard to live with sometimes, but it is what it is. Anything more you guys want to say about that one? That one I hear a lot, and that's one of those pieces that people talk about.
Yeah, Vitus had a oft repeated quote: "There's only one vote that counts, maybe two. The royalty gets to pick. They ask, and you can accept or not, but it's really just those two people who get to decide."
Yeah, if you want to vote, win crown.
Yeah, there you are. So the part of the saying, and this was particularly put for female squires and men-at-arms. Protect your reputation at all costs, for the spiteful word still wishes for women to keep her place. In my opinion, you must beware of those knights who would seek your company and fealty for reasons other than fellowship of war. The road leads to infamy. Many jealous men-at-arms will think that you are seeking to purchase skills and rank through other unknightly labors. I do not tell you these things because I wish to make you fear that this may happen, but because I know of great certainty that it has. So that's, I'd love to say this is totally unfair, and it is. And how people view this is unfortunately a real poor thing. I'm not going to say it still doesn't exist. And I think that's what Vitus is saying here too. I think back then it was definitely more. Now the good part now is I hear a lot less of that. And I hope it's because, again, Vitus trying to make people aware of things. So it's incredible. I'm so happy you hear a lot less of this, but it's still something you have to be careful of. And it's unfair, but it is what it is. So what do you guys have on that one? I mean, this is a subject by itself, right? This is what we call a elephant in a room episode. So,
well, I mean, I don't hear it a lot anymore. There's plenty of female fighters and knights that.
There's a bunch of people that want to say hi real quick.
That are badass and have totally earned their place. It's easy to talk and poo-poo people, because of jealousy or whatever, because they got the cookie that you might not have gotten yet. And I mean, if you're going to be salty like that, I mean, you probably don't deserve to be a knight.
Yeah. And obviously Her Royal Highness is a fighter, and the good part is she hasn't heard much about that. But I'm sure and she even says that it's something that women fighters have to worry about. So I'm glad it's kind of gone, and I know it's not gone, but I'm glad it's mostly gone.
Yeah, because there's no place for it. Really.
No, there's no place for it, and I see them working incredibly hard. In fact, in many cases, harder than almost anyone else, because they have to work harder than almost anyone else sometimes. So it's truly, I'm happy to see a lot of that gone. It's there are so many things in this book. Each position to stand as champion to a king or queen or baron is utmost honor to one who can obtain, but many do not do nothing with the great chance to win renown or worship. In other words, if you're going to be a champion, be a champion, because I'm going to tell you, people are looking, and if you do your job, this goes for anything, right? Do your job, and people will you will win renown.
Yeah.
Well, he talked often about his time as champion for Valharic. He said that time of serving something greater, to go back to this theme that we keep hitting, really changed his perspective, his outlook on fighting overall. He talked about going into a champion fight, and he wins the bout. He comes back, and I think he was talking to Sir Omeron. He was like, "I've never seen you fight like that." It was like you weren't even there. It was like it wasn't me. I was being the king's champion.
100%.
Champion fighting.
I had that same being Ronvalder's champion. That same feeling. It's like we had our champions fight at Penzic that I don't even. My brain just shut off and we just went.
Yeah, and you lived to that job, right?
Yeah, and it was like I was so anxious, because I didn't want to embarrass Ronvalder, and I a lot of really perspective came in that time too about just how like the kingdom works and how everything really is behind the scenes. That was a very eye-opening and joyfully burdensome time.
All right. So how about this one, Louis? I'm going to post this one if you don't mind, if you want to cover it. Let's see if it all goes through. Yeah, this one went all the way through.
Do not be afraid to forge bonds of trust and friendship with those good men-at-arms with whom you've had shared great exchanges in the field, and this can be great exchanges of blows or great exchanges of knightly talk. Look closely in the ranks of the enemy for that man-at-arms who best personifies knightly ideal, and strive to search him out after the fighting is done. So, little story that I can give, and I'm pretty sure this is where Ronis was going. So we were fighting a bridge battle, and I ran across. We did a column charge. I think I was in the front of that, and I bust through the east line, swung at people, maybe killed one, two people on my way through, and largely got hit and went to the ground. King of the East came over, picked me up, yelled at me, thought I wasn't taking blows, and sent me back. So I went back to our tent on the other side, and I thought that was horrible. And Lionel or Jason came walking over with somebody from the east, and he is bringing with him the end of his spear that had broken off when I charged through. And he had a little, so this was Master Carl from the east. And so he had explained that this is the coolest, most exciting thing he has seen, and watched happen. And he thought it was just so fantastic that he gave me the end of his spear and said, "Take this. It made my day, and this was really cool. And I thought you did awesome." So, in that 5 minutes, I had like my best SCA experience and my worst SCA experience back to back.
I think that's cool. We don't want to have our worst, but I think that the big part on that is you got a different view from different people, and Carl is still a very good friend of yours, right? I mean, just came to practice last week from Rhode Island, so. And then you went out to Maine to watch him fighting in Crown.
Right.
So this is the kind of relationships we should be making in the SCA. And Vitus talks about a ton of this in this book, how important it is. These are the pieces. You can go do your own thing. Guess what you're doing? Your own thing. You are not making bonds. You are not becoming part of the culture. To be a knight is to serve and be part of that culture of the mid-realm, or whatever kingdom you're in, or that knightly culture of the society.
So I have another one here that I just came across, and this goes to what if you don't make it to the accolade of knighthood? And so this here's a quote. So this brings me to those who will, by the turn of fortune's wheel, remain squires for the entire time that they are in the life of arms. I say to you that there is no shame in this, for the estate and rank of esquire is a noble and worthy one.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen for everybody.
Nope.
So you can keep chasing after it, and maybe that's just the way it is for you.
And
and there's nothing to be wrong because you're still trying to be knightly.
Right.
I know a lot of people I like better than my brothers sometimes. In fact, a lot of times. But, it's because I find, I think we're all responsible to find the things that will help us become more knightly in others. And that doesn't mean they have to be a knight.
And Vitus was very much a fan of excellence wherever he found it.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really appreciated about him was that he would tell people, when he was impressed with something, he would go out of his way. He lived a lot of these paradigms that he talked about. And interestingly, one of the paradoxes was he was also a huge fan of the just average Scadian, like the T-tunic wearing, been in for 2 decades. He had like a deep reverence for that whole subculture within our subculture.
Mm-hmm.
It was like he wasn't playing the same game that they were, but it was okay. They were having a blast doing their thing, and as long as they weren't harshing his medieval vibe, more power to him.
Yeah, and for a guy that lives in so many different subcultures, he sure couldn't point fingers, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he would, but he shouldn't.
Yeah, but it's kind of funny too. Yeah, he would, but there was something coming out of it that was going to be educational, and I think that was the most important part. And that education could be like, it's like, hey, that's the way they live. It's not the way I live. It's not the way I'd want to live, but that's the way they live, right? But he could speak truthfully about it. So I think that's one of the big keys. So there's a lot more book here, folks. We could, again, do 2 episodes on this. There's a whole episode on ransom. There's a whole episode on mercenaries. And boy, that mercenaries one is probably an elephant in the room episode by itself. Because boy, it's still, mercenaries back then weren't looked well upon. There's the conversation about should mercenaries be made knights. There's a conversation, if you get paid, should you be made a knight? You're doing a job. In fact, there's all the way to should you get awards if you're a mercenary and not serving the crown. So there's all kinds of fun stuff there. He goes through mercenaries, and that's a long one, by the way. But this is a really good read, and I really like, actually, and I'm not a huge medieval history fan or anything, but I really like how he puts this, because it allows me to think inside my character better, because it's presented in this kind of flavor, medievalish flavor that you would have seen in books back then. It makes you, and with what things that we were going through in the SCA, it really kind of makes us think internally. And it makes me think more medievally, and my person in that in the Middle Ages. And that allows me to be clear on what I should be trying to do. And so it's one of the reasons I really like this book. His next book, by the way, was really focused on knights and royal peers. It's that trying to remember
Chains of Our Faith.
The Chains of Our Faith. And boy, that one puts me back that maybe in the next 30 years I will live to some of that one. So the very end, I think Vitus, at the very end of the book, go ahead and give us some of that reading. In fact, read the last 2 paragraphs, starting with, "May God bless and keep every good squire who reads this book."
May God bless and keep every good squire who reads this book, and may the Archangel Michael lead the best of you to the holy cleansing bath, where true vassals come to be touched with the branch of holly. I pray that the Lord Jesus Christ guide well the steps of your chargers, and that the Holy Virgin watch over your every step taken in battle or in duel. Pray for he who has written this book, so that God and his angels may choose to guide me into paradise after a long life behind the lance and the shield. Knighthood was not easy for me to attain, since I was born under the signs of anger and strife. And many years I wasted searching after honor in the wrong way, turning my face away from service and from the truth. In this book I have hoped to save you some of the pains that I did suffer while I walked alone in the dark wood. Follow the voice of honor that calls to you, become a true vassal, and struggle to remain an honest man. Serve knighthood with all your strength. I, Vitus von Atzinger, knight strenuous, remain the servant of the fairest lady living in any Christian land, and those who say otherwise may seek me out at their leisure. God keep you all.
I love it.
Yeah, that's him.
That's him. You know, it makes me miss him a lot, and I think that's because that's him. And it's a love-hate relationship in many cases throughout the book, throughout his career. But he sure did bring us something here, I think. So it's probably 10 minutes after 9:30. We usually wrap up at 9:30. Thanks, everybody's hanging around a little longer. But before we go, Your Highness, you have something, anything you'd like to say about the book itself and or Vitus?
Just this is one of my favorite reads, and being in a household I've seen where yourself and many others have kind of made this a requirement for our dependents to come read this. And I think that's adds a lot of perspective to the SEA for our people.
Jamie.
So I think that Vitus, in his personality and his writing especially, he brought a lot of philosophy and magic to what we do. So easy. I mean, we see other sword fighting subcultures that it turns into more of a sport, and this can be more theatrical, can be more magical than that. You know, it can be the dream, and I think that he was a real driver, at least in the mid realm, for that.
How about you, Keith?
I wouldn't be the knight or vassal that I am without his guidance. And he was my second knight. And my original knight had stopped playing because he had moved out of kingdom. And after a tourney, Vitus was like, you know what? We're out eating with Valharic and a bunch of other guys. And he's like, you should be my squire. And I was like, no, that's a horrible idea. That's awful. He's like, why? You know, it's like, because we'll get banished or something. He's like, everyone loves you and I don't care.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. It's fun to kind of have, we talk a lot about medieval personalities, William Marshall, Fozart, all of these great personalities. I would say it's fun to have one of our own kind of modern living one.
100%, yes.
So, well, we're going to thank everybody for coming and listening to us. I apologize. We could get through about half the book, really. There's so many other pieces. At some point, I'm going to get this crew back together, and we're going to cover his next book, Chains of Faith. But meanwhile, I want to thank both Kith and Jamie, and of course our newest coach, Louis, for being part of the episode. Next week, we actually had scheduled that we're trying to get schedule a episode with a number of women who have fought and won crowns and coronets. but it has been difficult to line up the timing, especially as a number of them are different parts of our country. So that is going to be postponed probably for another month while we're figuring out dates. So we have an open weekend. We're going to try to fill that with something. We'll post something up on Coach's discussion page and see what you guys want us to talk about. I mean, this is one of these chances where it's an open episode. We have lots of other ideas that fill it up because, all of us love talking. But if you have something and it looks good, we'll get you guys a chance to give us some feedback because we'd love to see it. And let's keep the discussion going. Let's keep these things going because I think it makes us, the more we think about what we do, the better knights we are, the better fighters we are, the better instructors, the better mentors, all of these things, the better we are. And I'm going to call one out for, I think it was from the West, Miles. Was it Miles? But anyways, somebody had posted up that they thanked somebody that was a true mentor to them. And he is definitely a great man who he thanked. And it was nice to see it. We don't see that as much in the modern culture where people reach out and thank people for mentoring them, not only in the SCA, but in life in general. And over my birthday, it was interesting because I had a lot of people come back and say really, really nice words about me. To me, I get a bigger bonus out of that because for me, most of what I do is, to see others improve and live up to their dreams. And so when they do, I get the biggest, I'm sure they enjoy it too, but I enjoy it more. I don't care what they say. So, it's been a very wealthy time for me with Sive and Louis Stefano, winning crown and a number of other people doing stuff. So it's just a nice thing. I would tell everybody, reach out to the people that helped you and thank them because they don't have to. So thank you again,
Thanks
both
for
of you.
having us.
It was awesome. I look forward to having you on again and having some more discussion.
Excellent.
Anytime.
Everybody, have a great night. Be safe this weekend for the vets out there. Thank you very much. I can't thank you enough. Louis, what'd you say?
I said thank you.
Awesome. And have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.